This is the Capitol Rundown.
I don't think any of us want another 2020 election. I don't think our Secretary of State handled it legally.
There are procedures in place to ensure that this does not happen, and that's why it so rarely does.
He had trouble confessing that he wasn't in Tiananmen Square during the height of that fight between the communists and the young students.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Good morning and thanks for joining us. I'm Siobhan Klepfer. It has been another busy week in Michigan politics. The Great Lakes state was mentioned during the vice presidential debate Tuesday night, likely the last of this election cycle. But with Election Day just about a month away, will this actually move the needle with voters? Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Hannah Brandt takes us inside the post-debate conversation.
With 5 weeks until Election Day, the vice presidential candidates fought to make their mark on the debate stage.
I thought it went pretty well.
I think it was a good debate. The public got to see a contrast.
Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik was quick to declare a winner.
This was an overwhelming, dominating performance by J.D. Vance. I think the American people, he spoke directly to them about issues that matter.
But Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett argued Governor Walz was more authentic and truthful.
We need answers. We don't need dancing. And we get answers from Governor Walz.
But what really matters is whether either VP candidate won over voters. Does it move the needle with voters at all?
Well, I think it'll move it some. The first decision and probably most consequential decision that a nominee makes is who their running mate is going to be.
Congressman Mike Waltz points out the vice president is second in line for the presidency, which he says is especially relevant after the two recent assassination attempts.
Senator Vance looked presidential and that he was ready for the part.
But ultimately, he says voters will focus on the top of the ticket.
At the end of the day, this will be between Harris and Trump.
And the candidates are eyeing the finish line.
We've got a very limited amount of time to make our case to the American people that Donald Trump ought to be reelected president.
As this comes down to the final days, let's be very clear where we're headed. Let's be very clear about the excitement. And I can tell you, listening to these folks today, we're winning Pennsylvania. We're going to get this thing done.
In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
After the debate, the Rundown spoke with University of Michigan Director of Debate Aaron Call about the candidates' strategies and if they worked. The professor, who is also the author of the book Debating the Donald, started by drawing the contrast between the VP debate and the one between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris.
Candidates, Tim Walz, J.D. Vance, seem to generally like and respect each other, and I think that made for a better overall debate product. Had a big focus on important issues with less than 5 weeks now left to the election day, and so much has happened in the news just in the last week with what's happening in the Middle East and the dock workers strike, the hurricane, and we got to talk about several of those issues last night.
Professor Call described Senator Vance as having the harder job given his running mate's performance in the presidential debate.
He's not viewed as popular as Walz in some of the those ratings, and so he had a tall task, but he took it very seriously, did a lot of formalistic preparation coming in, and that really paid off. And he's just a natural on the debate stage, very smooth, making transitions. His legal background, just like Kamala Harris's, I thought really showed. Tim Walz, it took him a little time to kind of get his sea legs, just being governor of Minnesota. And you could tell he was nervous in the beginning, a big first debate like this. It took him some time, but as the debate transitioned to things in his wheelhouse, like abortion, healthcare, and then finally the closing minutes on the 2020 election, January 6th, he really kind of found his own.
So how does the professor grade students, J.D. and Tim? Who's the head of the class?
B. Vance, maybe A-, B+, had a tremendous amount of stuff to do, and he was really up to the task, and that's what vice presidents do. They may not, be integral to people's vote, but if there's a less desirable performance from the president, you've got some ground to make up for, provide a jolt of momentum to the campaign. And Walz may ramp up as well. Part of the reason that he also probably got a solid B, but is just a little bit less polished is his experience and background, but he's been kind of kept in bubble wrap by the campaign. You haven't seen him out as doing all those interviews, but I have a feeling now that since he performed pretty admirably, it'll kind of be a rollout of him. You'll see him more doing national interviews and bus tours and traveling, and I think that will start today.
Up next, former President Trump was in Michigan last week on the campaign trail. We'll tell you what he had to say on this trip when the Rundown returns. Welcome back. Former President Donald Trump campaigned here in Michigan on Thursday at the Make America Great Again rally in Saginaw. The Republican hit on many of his usual topics when criticizing the Biden-Harris administration. One of those topics Mr. Trump brought up at Saginaw Valley State University was immigration. Specifically, the former president doubled down on his claims of chaos in Springfield, Ohio, regarding Haitian immigrants legally living there.
I mean, how would you like to live like they're living, where thousands and thousands of criminals are put into your town or your city, and all of a sudden your whole life changes. Your whole life changes. You see what's happened with Springfield and Aurora. You see what happened, Springfield, Ohio. You see what's happening. Would you like to have that happen to you? Good, I was just curious. Who the hell can do that? Who can do it? They inject 32,000 people from a foreign land that has lots of problems.
But a new talking point for Mr. Trump is attacking the federal response to Hurricane Helene, which devastated parts of the southeast United States last week.
People are dying in North Carolina. They're dying all over those 5-6 states. They're dying, and they're getting no help from our federal government because they have no money, because their money's been spent on people that should not be in our country.
The former president is possibly referring to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, saying on Thursday that money for the Federal Emergency Management Agency may not last through the end of hurricane season, which typically is the end of November. On Wednesday, the White House announced that 1,000 active duty troops are being deployed to assist with recovery from the hurricane. That's in addition to the more than 4,800 federal personnel already on the ground. According to FEMA, almost 9 million meals have been delivered to hurricane victims as of Friday, as well as water, generators, and more items. Election security is on the minds of Republicans and Democrats heading into November, and both parties are talking about it. That and more still to come. We'll be right back. Welcome back. With former President Donald Trump still pushing unsubstantiated claims of election fraud in 2020 and both parties raising concerns about misinformation and attempts to disrupt the process this year, election security is a major topic right now, including here in Michigan. And it's not just Mr. Trump talking about it on the Republican side. In a recent conversation with reporters, Republican U.S. Representative Tim Walberg had this to say about voting in Michigan.
I don't think any of us won another 2020 election. I don't think our Secretary of State handled it legally in the last election. I think she was slapped on the wrist at the very least by the courts, but after the elections, for asking her clerks to do things that were not legal. And that's the type of thing that promotes the idea within the constituencies that it isn't secure and safe. We've pushed for training of poll watchers, ballot counters, attorneys to be on site, so that the majority of our American citizens, I know in my district, can feel secure that we've done what we can to make sure it happens appropriately.
After the 2020 election, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was sued over guidance she issued to clerks on several procedures, such as how poll watchers are credentialed. Courts ruled she acted improperly, but the Michigan Supreme Court ruled in August that she did not act inappropriately, and those instructions are still in place for the state's 1,600 clerks for this November election. On Friday, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel announced charges against 7 people for violating state election laws during this year's primary election. They include 4 voters and 3 election workers. The 4 voters are accused of double voting in Macomb County in August. The Attorney General says they first voted by absentee ballot and then they voted in person at a polling place. Nessel also says the 3 election workers ignored the signs that there was double voting happening.
There are procedures in place to ensure that this does not happen, and that's why it so rarely does. It really took a perfect storm to come together to allow these 4 individuals to double vote.
Nessel says the votes were counted in the primary, but they did not affect the outcome of any races. Macomb County Prosecutor Pete Lucido said in August that he would not pursue charges in the case. But the AG's office says there was probable cause for them to file charges.
So to have it 4 times in one municipality, in one election, is, I think deeply concerning is the way I would put that. So that played a role. But then, moreover, of course, when I saw the statements, Prosecutor Lucido didn't just deny charges. He was very explicit as to why he was denying charges. And I wrote down exactly what he said. He did an interview with Fox 2 with Charlie Langdon. And I was just deeply disturbed by some of the comments he made. First of all, he indicated that only one vote counted. And we know that that's just factually wrong.
The charges include those for double voting, which is a maximum 5-year felony. The clerks involved are charged with falsifying election returns or records. Coming up, we get Tim's take as our Capitol correspondent breaks down the latest political news from Lansing. Stay with us. From the debate stage to the auto industry, vice presidential candidates are making news here in Michigan. The Rundown's Megan Vaselli spoke with our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic to get Tim's take.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and there's nobody better than Tim Skubic to help us out. Tim, after Tuesday's vice presidential debate, we've heard from the national pundits. What has been the reaction to it here in Michigan? Did it change anything for voters?
Yeah, well, here's the deal. Generally, vice presidential debates, Megan, don't decide elections, but with this race so close, you have to almost factor in everything that might appeal to some people who are on the fence. Somebody watching the debate said, I kind of like that guy. I don't really like him at all. So here you had two gentlemen, and the reason you had somewhat of a substantive debate is that both of these gentlemen are out of the legislative arena. Both served in the Congress. One is now serving in the Senate. And basically, in the legislative process, you have to cooperate. You have to say to one another, you know what, I don't really agree with that, but if we did this, we might be able to work something out. So I don't want to say it was collegial, but it clearly had a different tone. And I think people at home wanted to see that sort of an exchange based on the issues, not the personalities, not who was such a bad guy or not. Now, there were two magic moments for both candidates that they really didn't look very good, many of the pundits said. One was Mr. Walz. He had trouble confessing that he wasn't in Tiananmen Square during the height of that fight between the communists and the young students. He never said, I wasn't there. He said, I was wrong. He said, I misspoke. But it took him about a minute to get to that point, and then if you weren't really listening, you missed the fact that he said he misspoke. Then the magic, not so magic moment came at the end of the debate when Mr. Walz and Mr. Vance confronted the question, did Donald Trump win the last election? And the answer from the vice presidential candidate, Mr. Vance, was not yes or no, but, quote, Tim, I want to move forward, which, of course, was not an answer.
All right. Well, while campaigning in Michigan, Senator J.D. Vance wouldn't say whether a potential Trump administration would continue the federal program to help General Motors convert facilities to produce those that produce electric vehicles. Now, does that worry people here in our state?
Yeah, that went off like a time bomb here in Michigan. Andy Shore reacted to it. Governor Whitmer reacted to it. A lot of General Motors folks reacted to it. Basically, what has happened here is that the Biden administration has come in and said, you know what, we're going to help this Grand River plant in Lansing convert to EVs, and here's the money to do it. Well, if Mr. Biden's administration and Ms. Harris lose, Mr. Trump is now the president, and he has a choice whether to continue it or not. So on the campaign trail here in Michigan, Mr. Vance was asked, how about you? Would you automatically restore the money? And he said, I'm not going to guarantee it one way or the other. And it sent shockwaves throughout the region because there's about 650 new jobs involved here, which is not chump change, and a lot of disgruntlement over what Mr. Vance didn't say. They were looking for the answer yes, and they didn't get it.
All right, Tim, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Have a nice weekend.
Coming up, we'll tell you what's happening with the dock worker strike and how it could still affect the economy. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Ports opened back up Friday after the dock workers' strike threatening the nation's supply chain was averted, at least for now. Naomi Ruckham breaks down the details of the new deal reached Thursday evening and what it could still mean for the economy.
Celebrations broke out in Brooklyn Thursday as dock workers learned they are back on the job. The new deal between the union and port operators suspends a 3-day strike that shut down shipping on the East and Gulf coasts.
We believe in everybody, all the foremen, all the big bosses. We never lost faith. We love each and every one of them because they never stopped fighting for us. And we'll never stop fighting for them.
The deal came after the ports sweetened their side of the bargain, raising their offer from a 50% raise to 62% over 6 years. But the deal does not resolve disagreements over the use of automated machinery, which has been a sticking point for port workers.
Robots don't pay taxes and they don't put food on your table, so it's very important to protect these jobs.
The agreement ends the biggest disruption of its kind in nearly half a century, threatening shortages of everything from food like bananas to car parts, home appliances, and even furniture. Some Americans even resorted to panic buying, reminiscent of the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, stocking up on toilet paper and paper towels. President Biden applauded both sides for coming to the table.
We've been working hard on it, and we just, the grace of God, the good little neighbor is going to hold.
Now the parties have until January 15th of next year to negotiate a new contract.
If you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we've got just the thing for you. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right now. This will take you to the sign up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletter. And that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for watching the Capitol Rundown. We will see you all again right here next week.